Good evening, all. This is Dustin, also known as Rope Aficionado, and this is the Dominance Dialogues. And tonight we have the Rabbi from Synagogue BDSM, and our topic is disc theory in practice. Rabbi, do you mind introducing yourself and a little bit about your experience?
So I am the rabbi. I identify as a gynosexual, ambimorious, sadistic, bratty, daddy, top, he, him pronouns. Um, in my vanilla life, if you can even call it that anymore, I am a certified sex therapist. I make my own toys. I sell them on my website. Uh, there are some fun toys like Lego nipple clamps and mop floggers. Um, but that's the gist of it about me.
Something I made note of is you said you were the brat daddy, and I kind of smirked. I've joked that I'm the brat master, right? So it kind of made me chuckle when you said that a little bit. How would you define a brat daddy?
So, daddy is a caretaker, brat is a rule breaker. The daddy is supposed to make the rules, the brat is breaks them or pushes the boundaries. A bratty daddy encourages the brat to break the rules and find new and fun, creative ways around them. Um, a reaction junkie, a chaotic good. In a great example, I'm not big on punishments, but if I'm doing a scene with somebody and they're on the cross and they're dancing around, rather than tell them, no, you can't do that, I'll just throw Legos at their feet and then they can dance as much as they want.
I love it. I love it. I can appreciate that. I can't say that's exactly what I was expecting, but at the same time, it's not far off. So
I mean, the rules I break aren't the rules that a dominant set for me. It's the societal rules, the community
mm,
expectations. You're not supposed to do a scene while dressed up like Bob Ross. You're not supposed to involve spectators in your scene. You're not supposed to use your bottom as a life size operation board.
oh, I'm already loving this conversation. Oh, so much, so much. Uh, the irony. So you brought up Bob Ross, and I've talked about it for a long time. I'm the Bob Ross of rope because at this point I've done suspension so long, it's unconscious competency, and I really feel like they're like, "What are you gonna do?" I don't know. Put somebody in there, right? And I really feel like that Bob Ross kind of energy, or maybe that's ego or something. Nonetheless, uh, I feel like I need a Bob Ross costume now. Now that you kind of instigated that one, and potentially do a rope suspension while dressed up like that.
I mean, it was a fun scene. I started with body painting her. When I was done, I went, oh no, this is all wrong. What's wrong? What's wrong? This is awful. It's terrible. What's wrong? I said, the trees aren't happy enough. I reached into my bag. I pulled out the top of a Christmas tree and started beating her with it.
Oh, I love it. Huh.
And you know how
uh,
Bob Ross would clean his paintbrushes doing this
yep.
thing? Yeah, I did that between her ass cheeks. Like every toy I had was paint themed or Bob Ross themed, hung paint buckets from her nipples.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, no, I mean that's great. I mean, not quite on topic, but at the same time, part of what I said, good conversation, and I think it's important for anybody that is either involved in this life or looking to explore this life to understand that like we get to define the boundaries that we play in. right? And
Yeah.
to some level, we can make our own terms and define them within the bounds of our relationship. And the reason I word it like that, I don't think we should hijack words, right? You can't take words that are already established. But like you said, a brat daddy. That's why I asked you to define it, because this is not, to my knowledge, not a readily chosen role or designation. At least it's not on FetLife yet, I don't think.
There were like 2 FetLife groups called Bratty Daddies or something along those lines, and there were like 4 people in each of them, and they'd been around for 10 years. So
Fair.
I didn't come up with the term by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm probably the one who uses it the most.
Fair. Yeah, no. I appreciate it, and I appreciate like your definition and elaboration on it. It sounds like a lot of fun. And I might have to play on that a little bit because I like to have fun. And that's the Brat Master was born out of me because I've always been just drawn to structure and organization and all these good things, right? But at the same time, there's a layer to who I am as a human that enjoys to have fun, right? And I was with a long-term partner and in an MS dynamic, and everything was right as far as authority. There was something just wrong deeper, right? Underneath that, right? As a human. And we realized that we both enjoyed having fun. In their version of slave, slaves didn't laugh and giggle and have fun. And in my version of master, I didn't get to laugh and giggle and have fun. And I'm just trying to keep it simple. And this is where she became a service brat and I became the brat master. And it worked well for us for, I don't know, another year or so.
Yeah, I don't get the people who think laughing during a scene should be forbidden or is a bad thing. It's called play. You should be having fun. And as part of my bratty daddiness, one of the things I very much believe in is what I like to call the Monsters Inc. theory of power exchange. So if you remember the movie Monsters Inc., the moral at the end of the story is they get more power from laughter than from frightening them. And when you're doing a scene with somebody and you're laughing and having a good time, yes, there's more energy exchanged, but also they can go take more pain, they can last longer, go to more extremes because they're not thinking about the pain. They're enjoying themselves. They're getting all the happy, fun brain chemicals, not just the scary ones. And it's a great way to push scenes and push boundaries, not cross boundaries, push boundaries. Yeah.
I really appreciate that clarification on that last one. Push boundaries, not cross boundaries. For my flavor of authority, I think that's part of my role. At least that's what I negotiate, is to push those boundaries. And more so, let's be wholesome about it. Let me hold your hand and take you to the edge where you're afraid to go alone.
Absolutely. I mean, that's part of the fun of it, is to push boundaries, to expand your limits, whether they're mental or physical.
I think that's a large motivator on some level for many of our actions, right? At least in the BDSM community. I can't speak for all walks of people, but it does seem that there is some overlying, for lack of better terminology, risk taking that is a fairly large commonality amongst BDSM practitioners.
Absolutely.
Nonetheless, that was great. But let's actually get into our topic.
Okay.
So my first question that I have for you tonight is, what is disc theory and how does it apply to BDSM relationships?
So DISC theory, DISC stands for dominance, inducement, submission compliance. It was originally created in 1928 by William Moulton Marsden in a book called Emotions of Normal People. Did my Vanna White thing with the book. William Moulton Marsden, a very interesting character. He was an inventor. He was a screenwriter. The three things he is most known for, though, is one, disk theory. Two, he invented the systolic lie detector. He was very interested in studying emotions and whatnot, and how that affected the physical body. Nowadays, we know that the lie detector is a somewhat flawed device, but at the time it was completely revolutionary. And then the third thing, and what he is most famous for, is he is in the Comic Book Hall of Fame for his creation of his marketing tool for disk theory, that being Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman, the magic lasso is a lie detector plus bondage.
That makes sense.
Marsden was not only very kinky, he was poly as well. He had a wife, he had a girlfriend, and long after he passed away, his wife and girlfriend continued to live together and raise kids together. Depending upon who you ask, they may or may not have been romantically involved. So disk theory: dominance, inducement, submission, compliance. There is I won't say another disk theory, but there is an offshoot of disk theory, the disk personality tests. They basically sanitized this and turned it into something different. If you're taking it at work, it's going to be dominance, influence, steadiness, and conscientiousness. Because God forbid we, don't take submission as a dirty word. Mm-hmm. So what the theory basically says is that people are happiest when guided by a loving authority. And that sounds like power exchange to me. That sounds like a good, healthy power exchange. Now, different people are going to define all of those words in that sentence different ways. Who are the people? What does happiest means? What does loving mean? What does authority mean? And different types of power exchanges will emphasize different words in that sentence. For example, Dom Sub, you're going to be emphasizing the word guided. People are happiest when guided by a loving authority. In Master of Slave, you're probably emphasizing the word authority. In a caregiver, little, DDLG, whatever you want to call it, emphasize on the word loving. And in a bratty daddy type power exchange, we're going for the happiest part.
Interesting.
So as he defined it, dominance produces activity in an antagonistic environment. Submission produces passivity in a favorable environment. Inducement produces activity in a favorable environment, and compliance produces passivity in an antagonistic environment. So basically what that means is inducement is getting somebody to do something for you willingly. Compliance is forced submission. They're doing it, but they really don't want to. And he defined submission as a warm and voluntary acceptance of the need to fulfill a request, and compliance represents fearful adjustment to a superior force. So this ties into another theory, psychological theory called transactional theory. Again, not a very popular theory, because the theory basically says every human interaction is a transaction, and people don't get the warm and fuzzies when they hear that. They don't like to think that it's transactional. They just do things for the goodness of their heart. But transactional theory says every human interaction is a transaction. You get something from it. You take something from it. Freudian scholars will talk about, the needs of the id, ego, superego, and matching with the person who you're interacting with. Jungian theorists will talk about the inner child and the inner adult and that sort of thing. I'm just saying transactional theory sounds a whole lot like power exchange to me. I will say every human interaction is a power exchange. Just kinky people negotiate it and are very forward about it and acknowledge it.
I agree with that. Actually, I was just talking about the other night that there's been a few of my guests that have brought that up, that most relationships, or if not all relationships, are authority based, just not all of them know who has authority. Whereas in our relationships, it's very clearly negotiated who has authority, where their authority starts, where it stops, so on and so forth.
Right. And transactional theory was created by Eric Berne in 1950. So it's much newer than that. It was not a contemporary of that. But basically, being guided by a loving authority is a transaction. So tying into yet another psychological concept of the 5 love languages. So the 5 love languages are somewhat problematic because, it's, you need to buy the seminar and the book and this and that. Fine, whatever. But really, it's just a great framework for talking about how you like to give and receive affection. Every relationship you have, you're going to have different love languages, both giving and receiving. But the currency of the transaction in transactional theory is going to be one of the 5 love languages. Yeah, you may not be in love with that person, but it's still one of those languages. So the 5 love languages are gift giving, physical touch, quality time, words of affirmation, and acts of service. Now, these things may be different, have different meanings to different people, and that's the part you really need to talk about with the partner to understand them. For example, gift giving. I need something that's really expensive for it to register with me, whereas with my current partner, anything I buy from the dollar store that has a unicorn on it, she loves, because it shows I'm thinking of her, as opposed to, the big investment. The big investment part doesn't do it for her. Physical touch. Is it, a pat on the back? Is it a hug? Is it sex? Is it spanking? Quality time. What puts the quality in quality time? For neurodivergent people, sometimes it's just being in the same room playing on your phone, and that's quality time. For other people, you need to be interacting and making eye contact and laughing and giggling. Words of affirmation, again, what kind of words do it for you? Is it physical compliments? Is it emotional compliments? And then acts of service. Wow, submissives tend to have that big as the way they give their acts of service. And the funny thing about, BDSM types of activities is it can be all 5 of those in one activity at one time. The act of service, the gift giving, all at the same time. So it's a great way to connect emotionally. And then to keep the transaction, it needs to be fair. It doesn't need to be equal, because there's no way to measure an act of service or quality time. I guess you could, time it, but what 5 minutes of hand-holding means to me may mean nothing to you. So, as they said in Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. The responsibility is first the needs of the submissive, then the needs of the dominant, then the wants of the dominant, then the wants of the submissive. And I write this with a lowercase n, capital N, capital W, lowercase w. So if you've ever seen anybody write that, that's what it's referring to.
So I may have missed it or I may have misheard. So you said you put the needs of the submissive before the needs of the dominant?
Yes.
Interesting.
But the wants of the dominant comes before the wants of the submissive.
I've heard it framed quite similar, but the opposite. Normally, the needs of the dominant, the needs of the submissive, the wants of the dominant, and then a lot of times you'll hear like someone being a little facetious and saying, "Well, if I have time, I'll worry about the wants of the submissive." I think at the end of the day, you have to at least address some wants at some point for a long term.
I mean, as with many different things in this lifestyle and even outside of it, as long as you're on the same page about it. If it works for you, it works for you. You don't need to do it the way everybody else does it. But that is the traditional way, which doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it wrong. It's just a way that's worked for a lot of people. So things to remember about the 5 love languages and how they are used as the currency of the transaction. The way you give and the way you receive could be completely different. Just because you show with touch doesn't mean you recognize it as receiving touch. It's going to be different in different relationships, even different romantic relationships. With this person, it means a lot. With this person, it doesn't mean anything. They absolutely can change over time. The transaction needs to be fair. Fair does not mean equal. For most of the time, for most relationships, it's fair. You're never thinking about it. When you start to get unhappy, this is typically why, because something has gone askew with this. Somebody has new responsibilities at work, so you're not getting as much quality time with them. So, when you have relationship problems, what's changed and how do we get back that love language that I'm now missing for some reason?
I think it goes back to communication.
Yeah. And it's, I'm not, it's the difference between, I'm unhappy because he's working more. No, you're not unhappy because he's working more. Because he's working more, you're getting less quality time. That's what you're really upset about. So how do we get more quality time? Yes, it may mean him working less, but it may also mean he's not going golfing every Saturday with his friends. He's now spending it with you.
Yep. Yeah, I think that goes into, I used to always use the word compromise in this scenario because I think that's the word that we readily use. Early in my podcast, I interviewed a gentleman by the name of Knights of the Mist. And the discussion was about collaboration. And ultimately, that's what this boils down to. It's two humans trying to work together to achieve a goal. There shouldn't be compromise. There should be efforts together, right? And like you said, it's not that this person's working more, it's that they're missing some time and they need to work together. And it could be on either person on why that time's missing.
Right. Maybe he's working more, so you need to go and have dinner with him while as an additional break during the day so he can work till 9:00 at night. Maybe that will scratch that itch. But it's all about keeping it fair and keeping the loving and loving authority. Whatever those words mean to you, whatever loving means to you, whatever authority means to you, so that you can be happy. Now, throwing one more concept in there, Freud's concept of libido. First of all, Freud is problematic for many reasons, but one that is particularly relevant is he called BDSM one of the most significant of all perversions. But to Freud, libido signified the instinctual, physiological, or psychic energy associated with sexual urges. And then over time, he evolved it to mean uh, basically motivation for all constructive human activity. Um, Libido, much like BDSM, to the general public is inherently sexual. It often is sexual, but is not exclusively about sex. So, libido is the constant quest for the next power exchange, for the next human interaction.
I think I, it makes a lot of sense. You know, we live in a world where we're so connected, and I think, at least for me, part of what BDSM offers me is a deeper connection with somebody.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like I hate to do the comparison thing, but we're kinky people are so much more honest and straightforward and direct when communicating, even with a stranger, because here's what I want, here's what I need to be safe, that sort of thing. And I see, all these couples coming into me, they're arguing about he never takes out the trash. Well, did you ask him? No, I just expected him to do it. I mean, part of my logic in becoming a sex therapist was because if you can teach people to communicate about all their, dirty, nasty fantasies about sex, then once you learn to communicate about that with your partner, communicating about whose turn it is to take out the trash should be really easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I said should be. It isn't always.
Well, it's crazy. I just turned 40, and my sex education in high school, what I remember of it was, don't have sex, otherwise you're going to get somebody pregnant, or you're going to get some incurable disease that's going to make your genitalia just look gross, and you're going to be untouchable and disgusting, and all the scare tactics, essentially, right? And
Yeah.
none of that worked.
I had one client tell me that they were told their penis would fall off if they had sex before they got married.
Oh, wow.
Unfortunately, state law around sex ed is woefully minimal. It must be abstinence only, and must teach the consequences of having sex. God forbid we talk about anything like consent or enjoying it or gender variation or orientation variation. Nope, don't have to do that.
Well, it's a wonder why a lot of times people are so confused. There's no education, and I think a lot of times in early adulthood or early exploration, we get our information from porn or sensationalized topics like 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah. I was actually in a virtual class today, and they were talking. It was BDSM and law type topic, and they were talking about if we want to start getting the idea of consent to permeate through society, we need to be talking to the porn producers and have them show the negotiation for the scene and have them show the aftercare in the movie. I don't think a lot of people would watch that part. They'd probably skip over it. But the fact that it was there would, that's what people are seeing as normal. Even if they skip over it, it's going in their brains as normal.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, and I think there is there is starting to be some more movements on trying to educate. I mean, just us as a society. I mean, the one thing that 50 Shades did for us is it brought commonalities, common definitions, and common terms out to the broader audiences.
Yeah, definitely a double-edged sword. It's not a great representation of BDSM, but it did get the conversation started for so many people.
Hmm. Yeah, a lot of interesting thoughts there. So you kind of touched on this, but in a different way than what I think how I propose this question, because it sounded like you actually, when I did my initial research. So let's just full disclosure. I
Yeah.
didn't really know much about this theory at all prior to this, and I thought about doing more research, and I told the rabbi off air I didn't want to taint the conversation. I want to kind of go in very new and open-eared. And I had to get questions somehow, so I had to do a little bit of research. And apparently I fell down one of the rabbit holes, so to say, of
Yeah.
the sanitized version of this theory. And I'm wondering how much that influenced some of my questions now.
Some of the questions you put out there definitely were influenced by that. It is hard to find information on disc theory as Marsden put it out there because, yeah, it is 96 years old now. It has evolved over time into something else, something that is more sanitized, easier for people to digest. They're okay with the word dominance, but oh my God, submissive? No, I can't be submissive. That's terrible. And it's kind of evolved into a competitor of the Myers-Briggs personality test, which, is a fun little thing to take, but what does it really mean in practical application? Not a whole lot.
And what is the distilled version of the S as of now?
It is dominance, influence, steadiness, conscientiousness.
Huh.
So steadiness and submission are not at all the same thing.
I
And
think
conscientiousness, not the same thing as compliance. Influence, I'll give them that's okay, a synonym.
a better one would have been like subservient. I think that's a more accepted term than submission, and still a lot closer.
Yeah,
Hmm.
or something like acts of service.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's evolved into something that's more personality test type thing and used for employee satisfaction or student engagement or whatever. Not at all what was originally intended. I'm not saying that information is bad or irrelevant. It's just not what Marsden had originally intended and not as applicable to the kink world. I mean, it's dominance and submission are right in the acronym, just like they are in BDSM.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Marsden for his time was a pretty radical feminist. Obviously, it's been 96 years. Some of his really radical ideas are pretty conservative right now, like women's right to vote. But yeah, I mean, any 100-year-old ideas in as far as human relations goes, are going to be a little bit problematic. But if you get the spirit of it as opposed to the literal meaning of it, it's pretty good.
Sure. So, with that said, though, you did bring up personality types for disc that made more sense for us. And since that was kind of wrong, and what you said's kind of right, at least in our scenario, would you like to elaborate on that anymore? Like, for instance, how does somebody identify where they sit in that? Right?
In the newer version.
No,
The modern-
in the older True to the Way version, but more so using your disc personality types of like the brat daddy. And I don't remember all of your examples and those different personality types where you said the brat daddy might embrace
the different
happiness.
types of power exchange.
Yes.
So the theory is people are happiest when guided by a loving authority. What word in there jumps out to you as most important?
Hmm.
And this is completely my own interpretation of this. But if the word guided jumps out at you, you're probably looking at a standard dom sub type relationship. If the word authority sticks out to you as the most important there, then it's probably more master slave. If the word loving jumps out at you, probably some sort of caregiver little. And then happiest is, my bratty daddy thing.
So for me, like when I hear that, it makes me really think that it's from like the bottom side, right? From the submissive side. Like I don't really do well under guidance, Rabbi, whether it's loving or anything. I mean, I guess in business, I'm usually a better number two. I'm like the Steve Wozniak to Steve Jobs type of guy.
Sure. Yeah, I mean the theory people are happiest when guided by a loving authority, definitely in a BDSM power exchange relationship. But if you want to go really macro on that, the loving authority could be your parents, it could be your boss, it could be the government. As long as they feel loving to you, you are going to accept their guidance, their control, however you want to put that. When your boss is screwing you over and seems not to care, he's no longer that loving authority and you're unhappy to work there. When the government is raising taxes, you don't no longer feel loved and you're unhappy with them. Your boss, the power exchange there, you're giving him your quality time and acts of service, and in return, he is gift giving you with a paycheck. The government, you give them the gift of your money, your tax dollars, and in return, acts of service, repairing the roads. Or
Depends on
whatever.
where you live, right?
Yeah. Repairing the roads, public utilities, however you want to look at it, they're doing some sort of act of service.
So I had like an aha moment here where now it does kind of make sense for me. Like that loving authority, it sounds a lot like spirituality or having faith.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it definitely could go that macro. And as long as God is loving, I am happy to be guided by him.
Hmm.
When God is vengeful, I'm not so keen on following him or her or them or whatever.
I don't want to get lost in religion or spirituality. That's not the discussion here, but
We are talking to the rabbi, though.
fair enough. But so here's something that I'd like to leave you with that's really made sense for me. So I was raised up very traditional Lutheran church acolyte, all the things. And at 18, I just kind of ran from dogmatic religion as fast as I could. And I searched spiritualities of various flavors and so on and so forth, and none of it made sense. And then along my path, someone told me that it's really simple, Dustin. All God is a good orderly direction. And now I can take it a step farther. Not only is God a good orderly direction, but it's a loving direction. It's a loving authority. Yeah, think on this one for a little bit more. I appreciate the thought.
So if you changing topic a little bit, if you ever want a good kick in the pants, go read some really old Wonder Woman comics because the BDSM in there is crazy.
Yeah, like prior to what year?
Probably the first 2 or 3 years. of the Wonder Woman comics. She's always originally Wonder Woman lost her powers when her hands were bound by a man.
I didn't know that.
But there is all sorts of bondage stuff type in there. She would get chained up like once in a book. There's even some age play and some pony play in there. Spankings. It's crazy.
Interesting. I might have to get on eBay after this and see if I can find some old Wonder Woman.
Well, just a Google search of Wonder Woman BDSM will bring up those frames.
Yeah, but see, it's one thing to see it; it's another thing to own it.
True. I mean, but these are really old Wonder Woman comics. We're talking a couple $100. So.
Oh, fair enough. Well, yeah. I guess I'm not big into the comic scene anymore, but nonetheless, interesting. I have to look into it. So yeah, it definitely seems that a lot of my questions as I'm looking at them were influenced by this very sterilized version.
Yeah, it's hard to find the Marsden version of it, and it's understandable why. But his book Emotions of Normal People is a great place to start. Another place is his biography. It is The Secret History of Wonder Woman. Apparently unauthorized biography because he was dead by then. And then there was a movie based on that book called Professor Marsden and the Wonder Women, which talks all about this theory and his relationship with his wife and his girlfriend and inventing the lie detector. Great movie.
Yeah, I'm looking for the book now. This one seems a little more reasonable.
Yeah, my copy of Emotions of Normal People, somebody photocopied book out of another book and then put it on the page. So it's like 3/4 of the page and dusty. But again, 100 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. This is I guess maybe I should have done more due diligence in looking into it to realize that I was not looking at the original theory and looking at the modern concept of it and interpretation of it.
Perfectly understandable. Because, I mean, this exact thing has happened before in a classroom setting. Because, I mean, it is an obscure one. Because, so bad.
So outside of the two resources that you recommended, are there any other resources that are like true to form that you'd recommend, even if they're like discussions or groups on side of FetLife or anything like that?
None that I've found. Nuggets here and there. But yeah, his book, he wrote a series of 5 books, but this is the one that's basically about this theory. His biography, whether it be the book or the movie, pretty good too. Yeah, I mean it's completely applicable to our lifestyle, but it kind of explains everybody's motivation for everything, and I hate being that grandiose about it. But yeah.
I mean, I think, going back to like Myers-Briggs, I've taken that a handful of times for work-related reasons, and it gives you a little bit of information, but what you do with that information is ultimately valuable. It doesn't define you.
Right. I mean,
But
I've taken. Go ahead.
Well, what I was gonna get at is like I'm an INTJ, and I don't think that like describes my desires or my motivators. But based off of the statement you said, it kind of sounds like disc theory can help actually give you more information on your desires and motivators.
Yeah. What love language are you seeking out from what person? Are you seeking out, are you wanting, are you needing? Which could
Mm.
be three different things, or it could all be the same thing. Myers-Briggs is okay. Me personally, every time taken it, my score on every single one is within 5 of 50, 55 to 45. So depending on my mood, I can score completely different from one day to the next, because above
Mm.
50 is one letter and below 50 is another.
Mm.
So I am, as smack dab in the middle of that as you can be. What does that tell me? Nothing. Maybe that I'm moody. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems that it helps people more further on the ends of the spectrum when it comes to how the Myers-Briggs breaks it down into 13 personality types. But
Something like that.
so, so you're saying that like, okay, I usually seek out like acts of service from submissive women, right?
Sure.
So what does this theory tell me about me?
That you're a dominant type. It depends upon how you get that act of service. Is it inducement or is it compliance? Are you doing something for them? Is the act of service being rewarded or in kind with something else? In which case, it would be inducement. If it is unfair, then it's compliance. And who gets to decide if it's fair or unfair? You and the person you're exchanging power with.
It's interesting you come back to that word fair. So I definitely, the way you just explained it, I would say that I resonate more with compliance, but I do keep gold stars in my head or my nightstand, and I have gold stars in my car just in case, right?
Sure. And to your partner, that may be fair. Because what you value as act of service, they may value the gift of gold stars just as much as, or even more than you value that act of service. Maybe not.
So we keep going back to this word fair. And this is an interesting word I like. And I really appreciate that you said like fair isn't equal or however you frame that. Because
Right.
I framed it similarly. I don't really believe in equality, but I do believe in fairness. Or I've actually joked that equality isn't fair. So for the sake of this conversation, when, to keep it simple, a dominant type and a submissive type are negotiating for a relationship that is fair, what steps can a dominant type take to ensure that he's doing his part to be fair?
Well, I think that's where the needs of the submissive come first. If you're putting the other person, the submissive partner who is less likely to speak up for themselves, less likely to advocate for themselves, if you're putting them first, that helps to balance it out. But check in often, make sure you're getting consent for everything within reason. Ask your partner, are you happy with this? Are you happy with how this is going? The longer you're with somebody, the less you need to do that because you just know from experience. But especially in the beginning, check in often. make sure they're expressing their needs. There are different levels of power exchange. How detailed do you need to be? Are you a person who is going to say, we're going to do this and see if they object? Are you going to say, we are going to do that? Is this okay with you? Are you going to say, what would you think about us doing this thing?
Mm.
Or are you going to be, I was thinking, well, maybe it might be nice if maybe we did this. Is this okay with you?
So I'm just gonna say, for me, like, some of that sounds like offering more authority to my S type than what I'd want,
Yeah.
right? Um, with that said, I do want to add the caveat that something that's really big for me, that one of my acts of service that I expect out of my S types is their voice. That it's their responsibility to use their voice with me. I need to know how they are physically, mentally, spiritually. I won't dive too far into it, but I need information to make good decisions. I'm not going
Right.
to ask for permission that's outside of my character as a person or a dominant. I'm the person that asks for forgiveness, not permission.
Yeah, absolutely. The submissive needs to feel okay with speaking up, and that there aren't going to be consequences for objecting, unless, of course, that's part of what you've negotiated in a fun way. But hey, I'm not up to being flogged tonight. Even when it's issued as a command, you can revoke that consent.
Mm. So now on the other side, what does a submissive do to make sure that they're being fair when they're negotiating for a dominant submissive relationship? I mean, a lot of it's always put on the dominant or the top, but I think that it's a shared experience, shared responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would tell the submissive almost exactly the same thing. Make sure everything is going well, check in often, make sure you have consent to do that act of service, and it's not something that's going to upset your dominant. Don't I mean it, valuable collectible, never clean it, and you're cleaning it because you think it's an act of service. That could go wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, the dreaded anticipatory service, right?
Yeah, and don't start out with anticipatory service. Learn it as you go.
Yep. Yep.
um don't rush into things. Take your time. um The other thing I would actually suggest to both sides of the slash is the relationship agreement. Every relationship has a relationship agreement. Just kinky folks and ethically non-monogamous folks will actually talk about it, whereas vanilla people, it's just kind of assumed most of the time. I won't say all of the time, but if you're single now, create that relationship agreement with yourself. This is my standards for a relationship. If I don't have this in a relationship, it's not a relationship. So that you're, especially if you have a history of abusive relationships, I'm not going to stand for this. I need this from a relationship. And it sounds weird. It sounds like you are trying to fit somebody into a mold that exists, and that sounds like a bad thing, but you wouldn't date a dominant person and then try to make them submissive. That wouldn't work.
Mm.
It's your bare standards for a relationship. This relationship went bad because of this bad habit one of us had. So in future relationships, we're not going to do that. And the person you meet somewhere down the road can agree to that, or they can not agree to that. You're not forcing them on them, but you're also not forcing a relationship that's going to go wrong.
It's interesting you said that. One of the harder truisms for me to accept when it comes to relationships, at least for me, is in order to be a good partner, you learn at the expense of your previous partner, good, bad, or
Yeah.
ugly. Just like you said, you learn what you want, what you don't want, and what you will not accept.
Yeah, and in my office, in my work, when somebody's going through a breakup, one of the first things I say to them, so what did you learn from this relationship that you're going to take forward into the next one? Um, because not every successful relationship lasts. Sometimes you just learn from things and learn from your mistakes and learn what you want and what you don't want. I mean, I'm in all these Facebook groups for BDSM, and there are so many posts of how do I make my partner into the person I want them to be? And I'm scratching my head, or why aren't you dating the person who you want? Why are
Yeah.
you trying to change them into something they're not? Don't meet the person and mold them into this. Find the person who meets your criteria.
Maybe I'm gonna be a butthead for a second, or maybe I'm not. But I think part of it, and at least it was for me. It took a very long time for me to really figure out what I want. And even at 40 years old, if I'm being really transparent, I'm still figuring that out.
Sure. I
And
mean, I came in. Go ahead.
I was just saying, I think there's just a lot of expectations on how relationships are supposed to go, and like the lineal process of this. And I think sometimes people just fall into a position that they don't necessarily want to be in. I joke that I'm a bad boyfriend because I would go on like 2 dates or 5 dates, sleep with someone 3.5 times. Next thing I know, they got a toothbrush at my house and they're calling themselves my girlfriend. And I'm like, I didn't discuss this. Like, hold on a second, what happened? And I think that's a big difference between the BDSM community. We're very clear. Like, somebody just doesn't pop up and have a toothbrush in my house anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I came into the lifestyle single, which was presented its own challenges,
Mm.
but figuring out what I wanted took a while. I mean, okay, the first time I heard the word daddy, I went, that's me. Now tell me what that is. I was right because, the signs were there all along. My high school girlfriend broke up with me because I acted more like a parent than a boyfriend. I had to figure out what that meant. And then it still wasn't quite right to me. It's like, and that's where the bratty came from. I was like, I kind of identify with that too. How do I make these two concepts work together? And, if your first kink relationship works, oh my God, you won the lottery. It took a few tries. I dated a slave for a while. Oh my God, was that a mistake? Um, for a number of reasons, the least of which was I'm freaking ADHD and you want a lot of rules. I'm not going to remember what you want. I'm not going to remember what those are. Can you punish yourself for that? Because I forgot about that one. Not a good mix.
But that goes back to just like kind of what my statement was. I think that a lot of times we really don't know what we want. And for me personally, like, I'm Sicilian by descent, and I was raised, like I said, very heteronormative, very traditional. And because of my upbringing and this, that, and other, I I feel that a lot of what I thought I wasn't really what I wanted. It was just what everybody told me I wanted. Society suggested this is what made for a good human, or a socially acceptable human, or however you want to frame that. Um, and then when we get into interpersonal relationships, we have almost no discussions in any kind of educational systems on how to have a successful relationship. So it's no wonder that it's just a struggle to figure it out.
Oh, yeah. I mean, BDSM is kind of all about rejecting society's norms. Maybe not all about, but we're not doing what we're supposed to do, having sex with the lights off in missionary position under the sheets with a person of the opposite sex. We're doing all sorts of other fun stuff. And there is the Venn diagram of kinky people and neurodivergent people. Yeah, there are so many neurodivergent people, ADHD, autism, whatever, because as I said, I'm very ADHD. We have trouble understanding society's rules, and then here's this whole subculture that is rejecting society's rules. Let's go there.
Yeah.
Also, we struggle to understand society's rules, and now we have a written relationship agreement that tells me exactly what the rules are. I can do this.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's 100% what it is for me, because, I've joked that I'm a bad boyfriend, superficial, very surface level. Oh, a good boyfriend's ones that will take me shopping, or he'll have a nice car, or he'll do X, Y, or Z. A good girlfriend was one that did A, B, and C, right? It was very surface level, but there was no commonalities. At least it didn't seem. So it was like,
right.
How am I
You were
supposed to?
asking all your friends what makes. You were asking all your friends what makes a good boyfriend. You were not asking your girlfriend what makes a good boyfriend.
Because I never would have thought that, right? And it was weird.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
There's this whole Disney fantasy of we're just supposed to know what our true soulmate wants without ever communicating with them. And that's nice and romantic, but it is bullcrap. A good, healthy relationship takes a lot of communication.
Yeah. And like I said, it's like, one of these life skills that we were never given. And I'm really confused on why, right? Like, but I mean, going back to BDSM, I mean, it's exactly like you said it. For whatever reason, I didn't think about asking a girl that I was dating or sleeping with, or however I want to frame that. I didn't think about asking them what they wanted from me or what I wanted from them. I didn't, why? But
because a bad boyfriend doesn't inherently know that. And that's what society tells us. The good boyfriend knows that automatically. It's inherent. You're a mind reader.
I think that's some of like the sensationalized like Disney stories, right? And they, like these fairy tales of the princesses and the princes, right? I mean, and our version is the 50 Shades of Grey. But it's going back to BDSM with why it works is, what, I'll just be honest. I don't have to want to define my relationship, but the BDSM community tells me I have to be ethical, to be responsible, to not be an abuser. And I don't want to be an abuser. I want to be a lot of things, Rabbi, but I don't want to be a bad human, right? I don't want to be a person that causes harm. And these are like some pretty broad statements here, right? But at least inside of the BDSM community, there's no one right way, but there are some pretty hard commonalities that comes into how we engage in these dynamics ethically, right? So one of the commonalities is trust, right? Open communication, honest communication, however you want to frame that. Clearly negotiated boundaries, wants and needs, desires, etc. So maybe, I guess, to some level, the BDSM community is my loving authority now that I think about it.
Oh, absolutely could be. And yeah, I mean, I'm not I'm questioning the word define. It's I don't think it's important to define it as much as it is important to make sure you are on the same page as whoever you're playing with or dating or whatever. What word you use to describe that, not important. You could both could use completely different words as long as the meaning is the same. Labels are helpful to as a starting point to make sure you're on the same page, but then you have to define what those words mean to you and somebody else. Is, with my wife, we both play with other people. It's non-sexual. For some people that would say we're not monogamous. For me, that fits my definition of monogamy, though, because there is no sexual play going on.
Mm.
Maybe I actually don't know if my wife considers that monogamous or not, but we're on the same page. We're in agreement of what's allowed and what's part of our relationship agreement. And that's the important part.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I think that's where a lot of times we stumble is because we have these expectations for our partners that we didn't communicate. Right? We weren't clear about it. We didn't make sure that I think the terms like active listening that I'm searching for here, where the person and I think there's another term for, me as the person communicating to ensure that they understood what I meant. Ultimately, I think that while it's a shared experience, there is a little bit more responsibility when you accept authority. I mean, that's the nature of the business, right?
Right. And when you're in a new relationship, it is hard to define things because you don't know what they want them to be. But especially in those early stages, expectations, unspoken expectations, can vary wildly. In my pre-kink days, I had somebody get mad at me because I had been talking to them on a dating app and other people, and they didn't think that was okay.
Mm.
Like it was like cheating or something. I was like, I haven't even met you in person. I haven't talked to you outside of this app.
Yeah.
Like if we had had a date, maybe. If we were in a relationship, yes, but no. I mean, that expectation of monogamy is, when do we become monogamous? Do we become monogamous?
And that's part of the reason why I think I was a bad boyfriend is because there was no clear cut time. Usually I figured out the girl expected monogamy once there was a toothbrush at my house. And I mean, I'm being slightly facetious here, but at the same time, like at that point, I'm like, okay, I'm into something now, right? I think I want to leave it here because it's been a while since I've said it. You said unspoken expectations, and anybody that knows me knows I love Chris Williamson from Modern Wisdom Podcast. It's just a great podcast if you're looking for intellectual discussion. And he has this quote that says, unspoken expectations lead to hidden resentments. And that's exactly what I think a lot of the times happens. And even now, I think inside the BDSM community, we're not immune to it.
Right.
It still definitely happens, but normally we're a little more forthcoming with what we want out of the relationship.
Yeah, I hate myself for always going to this example, but it's the example everybody can understand. Mismatch expectations. Ross and Rachel, we were on a break. Oh, I get it now. Not proud of going to Friends for that reference, but it's understood. Oh, yeah. Well, somebody comes in my office. Me and my boyfriend are taking a break. What does that mean?
Now I'm almost okay with it. I'm not great with small talk. I still haven't figured out that one, right? And I'm not always great at picking up the social cues or some of the subtle details. I'm like, I joke I'm the kinkier version of Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang, right? And I'm hypersexual too. That's the other difference. But other than that, me and Sheldon are pretty similar. I guess I'm not big into trains, but whatever. If you go back and you watch Big Bang though, Sheldon is daddy.
Oh
He
yeah,
has a
he spanked Amy a few times.
yep, for violating the relationship agreement. So very interesting.
I mean, I'm terrible at the small talk too, so I just kind of, here's a prop, approach me to talk about the prop, a new
Yep,
toy I've made,
yep.
or something like that.
My version of flirting is, do you like rope and authority? And then if you do, let's define that, because and I've talked a little bit about it, but and I think there's value for this conversation is just like we were saying, to be very clear in your communication and understanding that everybody is is on the same page. And I probably could have framed that much better. But for instance, like I think it was Slut PhD on an earlier podcast where she kind of stated that in many ways rope is divorcing the kink community. And if you get on Instagram and you get on social media, you really look at it, it is kind of divorcing the kink community. There are some very large social media accounts that are very all about this artistic rope, this flowy rope. You mention words like shibari, they never even heard of it, let alone that's where rope kind of stems from. And and I definitely have seen over just the last 4 or 5 years where there's a whole group of rope people that aren't even familiar with BDSM at all. And as a content creator, specifically, one that makes a lot of rope pictures and stuff, it's been very important for me to communicate what rope is to me. And a big thing what rope is to me is authority, objectification. And I've talked about it, whether it's communicated or whether it's not. I personally think authority is inherent when it comes to rope. Like I said, whether it's discussed or whether it's not. I've joked, if you're a 310-pound linebacker and you're 3 foot up in the air in my rope, you're mine now, right? I have authority whether you wanted to give it to me or not. At that point, you gave it to me when you agreed to be in my rope, right? And I think that the big takeaway here is what one word means to you, like what rope means to me, doesn't mean the same as it means to you. And I'm finding out that more and more that rope has a very different definition for a lot of the modern BDSM community.
Yeah, I discovered today, in fact, that there is a yoga slash rope studio right around the corner from me. No idea.
Interesting. I wonder if I know who or familiar with who puts it on. I can
I
sort of
couldn't
speculate
remember
out
right
that
now.
area.
I remember I followed them on Instagram, though.
Interesting. Yeah, if you remember at some point, send me their Instagram. I'd be interested to see who it is. There some time ago, there was a person that we discussed doing something like rope and yoga kind of infusion, and I was sort of interested, but then after like thinking about it more, I was just very honest with them. I was like, that's just not really what rope is for me. I don't know anything about yoga, and I appreciate that you want to like blend these two things together, but I just don't think I'm the human for you type of a deal. So
Yeah, I mean, I am not a rope person at all. I flow human crochet, the Starbucks of kink. I can understand how, doing tying as an art form, performance piece, I can understand that. I can't understanding bottoming as a performance piece, though. I don't understand how it wouldn't have some power exchangey type feelings to it, some energy to it, like that.
actually, I would speculate. I mean, just from my own observations for whatever they were, that once again, whether you went in to rope thinking it was going to happen or not, it does invoke feelings of surrender. I mean, and there's probably a couple of my favorite classes I've ever attended were by a gentleman by the name of Neuromancer out of Pittsburgh. And I also interviewed him for the podcast, and he's a neuroscientist by day. And he really talks about like the various physiological responses that happens to us during rope. And we can't really deny biology. Like we have some choice, but there's millions of years of biology that says when someone's behind us, we're nervous. We feel vulnerable, right? Even if it's a trusted loved one, there's still that weird feeling that they're behind us.
Yeah. From a primitive point of view, new stimulus is either it's going to eat me or I should eat that.
Mm.
So people who have ADHD, who are very drawn to new stimulus, that has not faded over time as we've become civilized. Ooh, something shiny, something new. I need to pay attention. But are you familiar with the Science of BDSM group?
I am. Actually, I'm looking forward to, I will be out at the Indiana Kink and Leather event here in a few weeks, and I'm fairly confident they're going to be there.
I will see you there then. But yes, they are. So a couple weeks ago at Guild of Deviated Standards, they put on a class, Subspace, the Final Frontier, and it was talking all about the science of what subspace is, and what it does to the brain and altered states of consciousness and all that kind of fun stuff. There is a biological reaction there, which they are studying. Because go figure, nobody's actually thought to study this who had the funding to do that. And they've been working on this for a while because at Beat My Valentine, I'm going to say 2019, they were having people volunteer to be hooked up to an
Neuromancer, I believe Neuromancer was the one that was doing that for them, or at least assisting with that.
It might have been. I don't know. But, one of my bottoms for body drumming was hooked up to that. So someday they will have the financing to actually run the data from that, but it hasn't happened yet because, those were the before times and now it's the after times and nobody wants to fund sex research.
Yep. Yeah, no, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Neuromancer still has the EEGs or whatever it is on his FET of his personal submissive at that time, where he showed that their brain activity was less than when they were asleep, right?
I can believe that.
So very interesting. And that's exciting to hear that you'll be out at Indiana Kink and Leather weekend.
Yes, we have been doing Indie Pup and Handler for 4 or 5 years, and always teach a number of classes. Spaz always has us teach the same damn class, though. Maybe different ones, other ones, but every year it is chain fisting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is an attention grabber for sure.
Oh, it absolutely is. The first year we did it, it was my first time teaching the class. It was my wife's first time experiencing chain fisting. And Spaz had the very bratty idea of adding an extra line to my class description that said, simultaneous ASL interpretation by the bottom available upon request, because that's what my wife does full time. I thought it was funny, so I didn't tell her. And then somebody showed up and needed it. So she was, while sitting in a sex swing, being chain fisted for the first time in her life in front of a big audience. doing her sign language thing, and that is the most fun predicament situation I have ever.
Oh man, that is amazing. I've heard of some fun interactions inside of this community, but that one, it's definitely up there. It's a first. I mean, like I said, you don't hear about chain fisting, let alone, someone that is, doing closed captions in ASL while being chain fisted.
Yeah, so I'm teaching the class. She's interpreting while I'm pushing chain inside of her. By the way, today's safe word is supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, and she's trying to finger spell it.
Oh yeah, no, I'm so looking forward to it. This is my first hotel takeover party in the after times. I'd have to actually sit here and think which one was my last one before COVID. I don't know if it was Wintered Wickedness or Cope or what, right? Which I'm sure you're familiar with since you're somewhat-ish local.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm super excited, and I'm taking one of my partners out there with me, and she's never been to anything like this before, and to share it with her and all the fun stuff, and see Spaz and some other familiar spaces. I appreciate Spaz so much. His energy is just amazing.
He's a hoot.
Yes, he is. I enjoyed my interview with him because he gave me banter in voice, and he had a text message, and he was giving me banter in the chat for the podcast too. I was just like, I can't keep up. So, wow. Yeah, no, what a discussion. Kind of a lot different than what I anticipated, but obviously part of that is due to the fact that there's such a sanitized version of this theory out. This
Sure.
makes me want to dive into it even more now. So, maybe if you have some free time between now and then, I can do some actually good research. I already threw Emotions of Normal People into my cart, and after we get off this, I'll go ahead and purchase it. But I might be interested in discussing it more when
Sure.
here in a few weekends at Indiana Kink and Leather.
I mean, it's a fun topic. I enjoy talking about it. I wish I had more chance to talk about it. I walk clients through it sometimes because it helps them to, adjust their relationship and get that exchange of power, whether I call it that or not, back to fair. Because, with vanilla clients, I'm not saying power exchange because I don't want to scare them.
Yeah.
But it is.
So, I mean, in closing, is there anything else, given the fact that most of my questions just really seem to be around the sterilized version, is there any more? I mean, you've given us so much, honestly. Like, I got a couple pages of notes over here. Is there anything that we missed that you think that's pertinent that we need to know?
I don't think so. I mean, if you buy the book, again, take it with a grain of salt because it is 96 years old. Terminology has changed. It is very heteronormative because nobody talked about that at that point in time, even though maybe his girlfriend and wife were involved. But yeah.
Yeah.
So now you know why Wonder Woman is so prominent within the BDSM community.
Well, it's funny because like even as an adolescent, I just remember like that was part of the reason why I did not like Wonder Woman is because it was a woman that tied up people, and that didn't appeal to me. Like, you know, um, but even then, not even just Wonder Woman. Like X-Men. I mean, there's I remember there's a famous cover where I don't remember who it was, Wolverine or something, is on like a St. Andrew's cross on the cover
Oh
of
yeah,
X-Men,
yeah.
right? And there's various other kinky references throughout comics, and I think that goes back to like your Venn diagram, as far as like people that are on the spectrum or neurodivergent. I also think that like that same diagram, nerds, geeks, however you want it, whatever word resonates with you. You probably play D&D or Magic or Pokemon, or you probably go to Renaissance festivals. I'm not trying to like call everybody out here, right? But you probably have a few quirks.
Yeah.
Which that's another thing. Renaissance Festival in Ohio starts up here in a few weeks, in September, I believe. I don't remember what date.
Yeah.
I'm
I
excited
don't
for that.
recall exactly when it starts, but I know we have a wedding to go to there.
Nice. That'd be awesome. Yeah, no, as weird as it is, I remember going there as a kid. So I grew up in Chicago, but my grandparents lived out here, and it was one of the big things that they always took me to. And now, I'm going to it 20, 30 years later.
Yeah,
But
there's a
now
lot of crossover with the leather vendors.
yes, there is. You'll see a lot of collars at the Renaissance Festival, right? And it opens up August 31st as the first weekend. Interesting. Well, most of my questions were absolutely useless. So I greatly, greatly appreciate you really just giving us the good information. And I don't even want to say good, the more true to history information.
The more pertinent to our lifestyle. Let's go with that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no, it definitely has some things spinning over here. Especially that statement and the being guided by a loving authority. It's still sitting with me, marinating. I'm probably gonna have to suss out a little bit, but in many ways, I look at my spirituality as BDSM, and part of that is because BDSM encourages me to be a better human, and that's kind of what works for me as spirituality.
So I'll put you on the spot. What do
Uh-oh.
those
All right.
words mean for you in that sentence? What does authority mean to you? What does loving mean? What does guidance mean to you?
Ooh. Authority's simple. Do as you're told. Someone tells, someone does. It's that simple. It stems a lot more from that, but we'll be concise since we're getting to the end of the episode. What does loving mean? Ugh. You're just trying to pull out all kinds of childhood trauma or something, right? So this is actually something I've worked on for a long time. I've talked about it. I was kind of raised in survival. I've been loved, but I don't know if I was open to receiving love. So love is a term that's still very complex and hard for me to process. I think the most concise way for me, I think of love is when you think of another prior to your actions. And I think that's probably the easiest way for me to suss it out now without getting mushy gushy or anything like that. But I think
Sure.
that's a good start for love for me. What's the next one?
Guided.
Guided. This is where I think of holding someone's hand, showing someone what to do, not telling them what to do.
Gotcha. So, distill it down, listen to what I say. I'm always going to put you first.
Interesting.
Is how I'm interpreting your definitions into that phrase.
No, I mean, you're not. I mean, fuck, man, you just might have saved me $1,000 or $2,000 on therapy on that one. Because you're not wrong. Like I've talked about it, and not publicly. So this is the first time I've kind of talked about it publicly. But and there may be a person that I've had a few people say that I need to watch how I say stuff. So I'm gonna be very delicate here. But I love the collar. I really love the collar, and you just made that connection, right? As long as you do what I want, I'll love you endlessly, kind of a thing, right? And maybe that's, oh man, we're getting vulnerable over here. What'd you do? But I think part of that is like for me, like to experience that love and to experience that even maybe that safety, right? Mm,
We all want to feel safe.
absolutely. And it was funny. I I do talk to a therapist. I think most adults should at least a few times throughout their life. I don't think you have to do it every week or every month. To each their own. And something that they called me out on is that in a lot of my statements, I'm not looking for, because my therapist is a woman. Um, it, I'm not looking for anything nurturing out of her. I'm not, and she thought that was very, very intriguing. And I'm like, I've never really experienced that in my life. And that's something that still trying to process and suss out, feeling that love and embracing it. All right, you got it. I didn't get that statement, and since you're gonna save me all this money in therapy, so can you distill it down again so I can write it down, please?
All right, now I have to think. Do as I say and trust me to always put you first, or something along those lines. Because you can trust me to always put you first. And I probably should have said this at the beginning, but my disclaimer, I am a therapist, but I am not your therapist, nor am I any of your listeners' therapists.
Yeah.
I'm just a dude talking today.
Yeah, no, this is just a conversation between two adults, right? No, but you're really onto something because like, yeah, I need to suss that out. I mean, in many occasions, I've had it where I didn't end the relationship. I'm almost always willing to work on things or fix things or so on and so forth. It's just really, I don't know, my nature, I guess, is kind of commitment. And I think how I see it is how I see commitment is through that authority. When somebody listens enthusiastically. And that's not surprising because I was raised by a very strong woman, and I've had a lot of strong women in my life. So it's not surprising that I want to love through strength as well. Hmm. Well, thank you for helping me have some kind of revelation here.
No problem.
All right, now we really got to wrap this up because I got a lot of thinking to do. All right, anything else?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. No, I mean, if I needed to cry, I think it's okay. I don't think I need to, but maybe. But in closing, I think I already asked about resources. You've thrown out the book there. You've dropped a couple resources, but now I want to know about resources for you. You said you're going to be at Indiana Kink and Leather here in a couple weeks. You're going to be educated there. What kind of classes you got going on? Where can we find you? We got your website in the show notes.
Yep.
But
The website and most of my social media is Synagogue BDSM. That's Sin with an I because I'm extra like that. I think on TikTok and Instagram it's Synagogue Kink because they're stupid like that. But upcoming classes, as I mentioned, chain fisting. My partner is doing a 201 level pony play at Indiana Kink and Leather Weekend as well. I have a class on Bratty Daddies coming up in the All About Community virtual convention September 21st. Electric Mayhem, which is electro play for Electroplay, another Bratty Daddy, and body drumming in Kink School, which is another virtual convention, KinkSchool.ca. I'm marketing director, so I probably should plug that a little more than I do for them. And then Electric Mayhem 2, which is Electroplay Beyond the Violet Wand for Be the Difference Munch in December.
Sounds like you're pretty active. Pretty active.
And I was looking, we only have 7 classes on the agenda. It's really light right now.
Yeah. I mean, to each their own. But I mean, I'm sure you find value in it.
Yeah, I mean, I have definitely, at one point I had 26 classes scheduled. That was a little much. So 7 is reasonable.
Yeah, I'm working on, I just got actually a signed contract with a local company in Columbus to do a rope series. And it's been a while since I presented for various reasons, and just coming back out and like building out new classes and a new approach to how I've taught rope before. Like I'm forcing people.
Yep.
Awesome. Well,
anybody has questions about disc theory or anything else, website is the best way to get a hold of me, or any of the social media. All of that is on the website.
Perfect. I will make sure that gets posted here too. 1 second. I just had it. Where'd it go? Here we go. So I'll put that link right here in the chat. Other than that, I just want to say how much I appreciate your time, the thoughts that you spurred. Holy freaking crap, the thoughts that you spurred. Hopefully me and you, or maybe hopefully you have some time, but we can sit down and chat a little bit more, in Indianapolis here in a few weeks. But thank you. Absolutely. I mean it.
Not a problem at all.
So with that said, it's my bedtime. Let me get out of here, guys. See ya.